Hello, welcome to CSC7132, Operating Systems and Networking. This is Brady Chen. In the previous section, we talked about the implementation of file directories. A file directory, or sometimes called a folder, is a special purpose file that records information about other files and possibly other directories. Now, in this section, section 8.4, we're going to talk about operations on files. Okay, now in order to reduce the size of the video, we're going to split the section 8.4 to two parts, part A and part B, and this is part A. Now, the operating system file system provides a set of high-level operations to create, destroy, read, write, and otherwise manipulate files. So we're going to talk about each of the operations in details. Okay, so let's discuss the first operation, the create file operation. Now, remember, in the previous section, we just talked about a file directory, right? A file directory contains a whole bunch of files that was created. So I have a file name, okay? It could be XYZ or whatever. So then there's a pointer to the file control block. Okay. And then there's a hole over here. And there's another file. And there's a pointer to the FCB, the file control block. Okay. So let me actually use the different color to represent the file. Okay. So here's the pointer to the FCB. Okay. So now to create a file, a new file, the file system searches the directory for a match to avoid the duplicates. For example, if I want to create a file with the file name called ABC, so I need to check whether the file name ABC has been used. Okay, you're going to check with this file and find out, okay, ABC is not used. No, this is not ABC. So none of the file used the name ABC. Okay, so if no match is found, the file system allocate a free entry. So for example, here, I find a free entry here, right? And then enter the file name. So I'm gonna put the file name here. Let's say the file name is ABC. Okay. And then I'm gonna create a file control block for that particular file. Now, a typical file control block contains some information, the attributes. For example, the length of the file, and then you're gonna create a lot of disk blocks. Okay, block 0, block 1, block 2, block 3. There's a whole bunch of blocks. Now, initially, because this is a new file, so the length of the file should be 0 because no one has, written anything into the file. So the length of file is 0. Blocks 0. Blocks supposed to be, each block is supposed to point to a disk space. Okay. Now initially, you can actually point to now. Okay. none of the block actually point to the actual data in the hard disk. Okay, so that's the initial case, and then so you're gonna and point to the FCB. So that's a point. Okay, so now a new file has been created. Okay. Now, when a file has been written into, so for example, someone just wrote something into the file. So then some of the FCB entries point to valid blocks on the disk. Okay, so for example, when someone actually writes something into the file, then it's no longer null. Okay, this is no longer null. Okay, a block away is probably no longer null. So you can write something into it. So let's see. Let me actually delete that one. So once the write operations are actually executed, then you can actually write into a disk block. Okay, and this can write into another disk block. So the users don't see this because that's actually the file system. File system can basically just point the blocks to the actual location in the disk. Okay, so that could be one of the disk location here, and that's the other disk location. Let's see here. Okay, and then once you actually point block 0 and 1 into the actual disk location, now the file is no longer empty. So in that case, don't forget to update the length. Okay, depend on how much data created and how many blocks are actually used. The length is going to be changed from 0 to so from 0 to L. Okay, so it's no longer 0. So this is how the create file operation is actually performed. Now, the destroy file operation is the opposite of create a file. Okay, now to destroy a non-empty file, the file system release the file's disk block. Okay, now it first release the file disk block. Okay, and then the FCB. Okay, so you can release the whole thing. So finally, the directory, the file directory, the directory entry is marked as empty, which completes the destruction of the file. So now in this case, it's going to be delete the file name and also delete the pointer. So you can actually basically mark it as empty. So in this case, I can actually put the this color over here, completely mark as empty. So let me see. Oh, I cannot delete it. So let me just simply so I can actually completely delete, mark as empty. So then I change the color back to green, just mark it as empty. So that means so the file system can allocate a next file into the location, but you have to actually, disconnect it. Okay. So it's pretty simple. It's just opposite. Okay, so let's talk about the open file operation. Now, before we talk about the open file operation, let's first introduce the open file table. We call it OFT. Okay, so open file table is a data structure that keeps track of all files currently in use to facilitate efficient access to and manipulate of the files. Okay, so it's a table. Okay, let's see. So this is open file table. Let's see. Okay. It contains a lot of things. Now this table first actually contains read and write buffer. Okay. So the read and write buffer basically stores the disk blocks that contains the data. And the current position, the length of the file, and the prot, basically it means the protection level of the file. Okay, and then the file control block, the FCB. So the file control block eventually is going to be the pointer pointing to whatever the file control blocks for this particular file, okay, which is open. So remember that all the files are stored in the file directory, right? So I have a file, let's say, let me see, a file ABC, okay, and then there's a file control block, right? And then there's another file, DEF, okay, so then it has a file control block. And then there's a sun whole and a sun occupied, and then XYZ, and then it's point to the FCB. Okay. Now FCB contains a lot of information like protection, let's say protection P. Okay, it's a protection level for each of the file, and also the length. Okay, length L. Let's see, that's L1. Okay, I use L2 because each file, the length of the file might be different. Okay, so it's kind of messy. So I have a block 0, block 1, block 0, block 1, Okay, so now this point to the disk location, right? And another block point to another disk location. So that's the information. Okay. Now, if a file is open, then the information about this file will be stored in the open file table. If all the files are not open, it's not open yet, so then it's not in there. So if a file is open, the information about the file will be stored in the open file table. Okay, let's see how we gonna update the open file table. For example, if this file is open, let's say ABC is open, then if the file is open, then the let's see the ABC information gonna be stored in here. Okay, so let's say the current position 0, length is L1, right? Because it's L1, and the protection is P, and then the FCB, it's actually pointing to that one. And also the file directory, the pointer of the file directory is going to be removed because if it's open, then no one else can access the file. Okay, so at this moment. And then there's an index, open file table index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, da da da. So the index basically represent the where this particular file is stored in the open file table. So for example, if file ABC is open, okay, so the information about the file ABC is stored in the open file table, and then that index is going to be used to reference that ABC table. If any actually process wants to write or read any data from ABC, because the file is open, right? So then you're going to refer the index, which is 1. Okay. So we're going to talk about this a little bit later. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about the open file operations in detail. Okay. So first, let's suppose we have a file directory. And we have a file called ABC. And the ABC file has a file control block. The file control block contains the related information, right? So then one of the important information is the protection information. Why? Because when a process tries to open that file, the file system, the FS, is going to check the protection to see whether this process actually is allowed to open the file. So you first need to check the protection level, okay? And then the length of the file, and then a couple of blocks, block 0, block 1, block 2, that you have a whole bunch of block. And suppose this file is not empty, so block 1 actually points to the disk block, the actual block in the computer hard disk. Okay, so that's in the actual disk. Okay, so then it's point to this. Okay, so now in order to open file ABC for sequential access, the file system searches the directory for a match. If found, the entry points to the so the entry is going to point to this particular file which can access the file control block, right? And the file control block contains all the attributes for this particular file, including the protection levels, length of the file, and a whole bunch of blocks that points to the actual disk blocks. Okay. Now, among other attributes, FCB, the file control block, contains a list of disk blocks containing the file contents, right? So we just mentioned that. Okay. It contains disk contents. So various different contents. Okay. Now, if a process tried to open the file, Now the file controls, file system going to check the protection information. Okay. You're going to check the protection information. Okay. So the file system verifies that the process who try to open the file has the necessary access rights. That's important. And if the request is valid, the file system allocates a free OFT entry. Okay. Let's see. I haven't drawn the OFT yet. That's the open file. Table. OFT. Okay. So remember, the first item is the read or write buffer. And then we have the current position. And what else? The length of the file and the protection information. Okay. And file control block. It's not going to store the whole file control block. It's just to actually store the memory address, the pointer to the file control block. Okay. And there's also an index here. 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Remember, actually, some of the entries for the open file tables are occupied. I use red color. Okay. So these are, let's see, these are also used by another file. So that means, some other files actually are open and used, and the information are stored in the open file table. This is also used. And some of the information are not used. Okay. So for example, let's see. No, they're not used. It's free. Okay. Now, once the file system verified that this process, that invoking process has the right to access the file and perform the requested operation, and then the file system going to find and allocate a free entry in the OFT. Now, so then it finds this free entry here, right? Because this is not free. This is not free, but this is actually free. Okay, I used the red color. Oh no, green color to represent a free entry. Okay, in the OFT. Okay, so then the FS set the current position as 0. Okay, let's see. The FS is gonna set the current position as 0. Okay, and copy the file length from here to here. So the file length is L. So I copy the L from here into the OFT. Okay, the column that actually pointed to by the LEN, the len. And also the access information, P, here. Okay, access information to the OFT entry. Okay. Now, to avoid having to search the directory again in the future, the file system copies the pointer to the FC into the OFT entry. So this address, okay, pointed to the FCB. So that pointer will be copied here. Okay, so if that's a P, oh, it was confused with the protection. So the pointer going to be called copied here. So that means the entry FCB will point to the same FCB that this entry is pointing to. But now, okay, so the directory is no longer needed. So then I disable that point. So now this OFT entry gonna point to the FCB. Okay. So so then we're gonna actually copy. Let's see. Let me actually delete that one. Okay. So let me just do this again. So that's 0, that's L, that's P, and then I'll copy pointer this to the FCB. And then I'm going to copy the first block, block 0, the information on the first block into the buffer. Okay. So the first block will copy into the block. Okay. So that's block 0 will be copied into the read and write buffer. And also remember that okay, the index will be used for the follow-up access to the file. So the process is going to actually read the file information like a data, read the data or write data into the disk block using the index2. So that index2 is dedicated in the open file table. The index2 of the open file table going to be used for the follow-up read and write operations. Okay, so that's the open file. Okay, so far we have talked about operations such as create the file, destroy a file, and open a file. Now we're going to leave the other operations on file to part B. Now in part B, we're going to talk about read a file, write a file, and seek to a position and close a file. Now these operations requires that the file has been opened. So an entry has been created in the open file table. Now before you can perform these 4 operations. And we're going to move this and postpone the discussion into the part B to avoid a long video. Thank you.